the safest place I can be with. So at these, we'll see. I can spend probably an hour on each one of these, but here goes. So let's start at the beginning. As a little girl, I grew up in Beaver Cleaver's home. My mother was Jim Cleaver, and it was perfect. I was totally white privilege, middle America. It was fabulous. I had everything I ever wanted. My dad started out pushing broom at the telephone company, and mom was a stay-at-home mom, and I had one older sister, and it was beautiful. It was a beautiful home. I didn't know I was totally to be, and I just didn't fit. Even back then. And I recently kind of figured out that, I had ADD, and looking back, I have a picture of me when I was like 3, and I had 2 chipped teeth. I had a black tooth and 2 chipped teeth. I face planted into a coffee table and chipped one of them when I was learning to walk, and then my sister and I had beds that were T-boned together like that, and I face planted into the wall. And so here I had these blonde curls, and for 2 years I had these 2 chipped teeth and a black tooth. Maybe I was born this way. It's like, yeah, I was born that way. And so I didn't know growing up that balancing a checkbook was hard. Having dinner on the table at 5:15 was hard. That marriage was hard. The only time I ever in my entire life saw my parents have words with each other was when, in college, when my dad wanted to change the locks and my mom didn't. Otherwise, they were totally in love with each other. It wasn't fake. They really, truly loved each other and really had a beautiful home. But still, there's difficult things, and they made it look easy. So when I got out on my own, I lived at home until I was 23, and then I got married, and he did stuff, and I didn't fit. It just didn't work for me. And I was bullied in junior high school. I had a couple of kids, of course I totally remember their names, and they'd go 1, 2, 3, and kick me in the shins, these 2 kids. And what do you do? What do? You just think you deserve it for some stupid reason. I don't know what else you do. I don't know why they were doing it. It's like you look back and reflect on stuff, and you think you got to talk about it, and why did they do that? I think you just have this vulnerable look on your face. I don't know. You look weak. You emit weak rays or something. And one time, I cracked that kid on the knuckle with a ruler, and it had one of those little edges on it. When they sent both of us to the principal's office, this kid had been in the principal's office more than once, I'm sure. I still know exactly where his house is at. And so they called my mother, and mom let me go sit in the car, and she's like, this kid deserved it. He deserved it. But as my mother is in the principal's office, this kid, I'm sitting in the car, is circling the car, and I'm sitting there outside of Cahill School. It's terrified, fucking terrified. Terrified, and that stuff just sticks with you, it stays with you. And then in junior high school, there was a gal named Angie who bullied me, and my future brother-in-law's younger sister, her name was Larcy, she passed away this last year. She was my protector, and she threw that chick up against a locker once and held her by the throat, and she's like, you know what, I'm gonna leave my friend alone. But, why did I get picked on? And at high school reunion, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, I told her that she bullied me. And I stood up to her, and she's like, oh, you did? I'm like, yeah, I did. It just felt good to finally say something about it or whatever, but again, I just didn't fit. I didn't see my friends getting bullied and picked on or didn't know anything about it. I just know that I didn't measure up, I didn't fit. How many times I swear, every time that we have a speaker I listen to, it's a reoccurring thing. I didn't fit, I wasn't good enough. Those 2 things are almost always come out of somebody's mouth. They just do. And then mom, my sister was just normal. She was just a normal kid. She got along great, had great friends, had normal boyfriends. And, my mom, in the 60s, 50s and 60s, it was all about image. So much image. That was it. That was everything. That was just the way it was at the time. and still is today, but way back in the 50s and 60s, that was really a big deal. So, I had a boyfriend, my first boyfriend, Jerry Robinson. He later on got killed in a motocross accident. But she told me that, sex is normal, Angie, but drugs aren't. Well, I wasn't ready for that kind of relationship, and I felt like I didn't fit again. Some of my friends were having sex, going all the way and doing that shit, and I'm like, oh, are you serious? Seriously, I was like, and I was very immature at my age. My friend and I was 15 when I finally started my period. I was very physically immature and emotionally. And reflecting back, it's like, God, it wasn't okay. Sex wasn't normal at 15 years old, especially if you weren't mature enough for it. It was cruel. It was absolutely cruel for my mom to say, well, here's birth control if you want it. And so I really thought it was horrible. And so I really didn't fit again. And that really sunk me into a hole because, anyhow, that was a horrible, horrible thing for me. And so give me more drugs and alcohol. Jeez. Because not only did I feel really different because other people were, and then come to find out just a few years ago, I get together once a year with my friends from junior high and high school, that there was just a few of them that were doing that, but they were the ones that were talking. The rest of us we weren't talking about it. But there were a few that were, and so, and then I learned, sex is power. If you're able to do that and talk about it, then you have the power over men, over your life, and some of these things, or so you think. So, anyhow, that really. So I experimented doing some other things too, just find out, am I guilty? What's wrong with me? There's got to be something wrong with me, right? Because no one ever approached the fact that maybe you're not emotionally ready for this. Maybe God doesn't. This isn't God's plan for you. It's really not His plan at all to be screwing around when you're 15 years old with boys. It's okay not to be handled like that when you're that young. That's okay. But I didn't figure that out for 30 years later, that was really not, I was okay to have that boundary. Fuck boundaries, what was that? So that was another, really didn't fit sort of thing. And, like we all talk about that first drink, that first drug, I think I started, and Susie, the gal who, we drink at her house, and we did, and we all loved it, and started smoking weed a year or two later, because then that's when we could get our hands on that, and my friends, they saved me, but I just didn't drink like them. But when you're the one who's getting shit-faced and drinking from the very beginning, the Joe and Charlie series really, really helped me understand that alcoholism isn't, it was morality. I always thought it was a morality thing because that's how my dad felt about his brothers. We had two brothers that on their death certificate was cirrhosis of the liver. So it runs in the family. My grandpa was an alcoholic, and it's just, and that's traditional too in alcoholics. But I don't know where I was going with that, but anyhow. Then drugs a couple of years later, marijuana, that's where we could get, and then, of course I tried a few other things. I'd try anything, I'd try it. I did have a standard, all drug addicts and alcoholics have standards. I wasn't going to inject anything. I drew the line at heroin, my standards. But we just partied around, and they say to me once, oh, I know what you're saying about that. I didn't realize I was getting so much more shit-faced than my friends. I just thought everybody was getting that drunk every single time. The Joe and Charlie's. So that helped me explain to me that it wasn't a morality issue. That, we just don't have an off switch. That's the difference between alcoholics and non-alcoholics. Non-alcoholics do have an off switch. They can decide if they want to have 2, 4, or say even 7 drinks, if they want to tie one on. They can decide when they want to stop drinking. Alcoholics cannot decide when they want to stop drinking. We cannot decide. How we plan all day long that we're not going to drink, and then we do, and pouring that crap down our throat. I remember when I had a fever one night, I said, I'm not going to drink, and here I am uncontrollably taking that that shit straight down my throat, and knowing that I'm fucked. I don't know if I can get out of this hole. Anyhow. So, listening to Joe and Charlie really helped me understand that it wasn't immorality. It can become, because it's our best friend. Lady Gaga's got a song, that talks about, I need you more than dope, which is our life. We need life more than dope. But when you know that you need not life more than dope, but you don't know how to stop, and you don't understand that you don't have an off switch, so you just spin a little bit deeper, and then you're down in this hole, and you don't know how to get out. That incomprehensible demoralization sort of thing that so many of us experience. Well, I think everybody. We don't get to AA because things are going well for us. Nobody does. My understanding. Hey, it sounds like fun. He might be getting in the hand. I don't know that I met anybody who walked in saying, it might not turn out well. It's not turning out well. That sort of thing. So my friends, I drank alcoholically all the time, and one story, the J. Dias Band concert, of course I always drink more than they did, and they saved me from the Red Cross, and my friend Annette. The most what I remember is the Red Cross, they tried to take me away because I was puking, I couldn't walk, I had to take off my shirt and put on the J. Dias Band t-shirt because I had puke on. It's the one I had to wear. And they did. They didn't let our Red Cross take me away. And I'm still friends with these guys today. And they're so supportive of me. If they ever saw me pick up a drink, they'd tackle me to the ground. They absolutely would. I'm really grateful. But, still not fitting and whatever and all that stuff. So then I proceed on to marriage. At first I married a drug dealer. That was great. That was good stuff. It was really great for a long time. It was good. Until it wasn't, it works till it doesn't. And then, I traded that, and he was a sex addict as well. I didn't realize that till just not even that long ago. And I don't mean sex addict in a way that's, all weird and kinky and shit. That's what most people immediately go to, this really bizarre stuff. I'm not saying it could be, but that's what it wasn't. This was more about mind control and oppression, total oppression and mind control. But it's so subtle, because they want to protect their prize, so they're really good at doing that. And I had no idea when I was 20 years old that was going on. So, and I, threatened divorce for so many times, but his parents had been, she filed for divorce 3 times, so he just never thought I was serious, and I was. And I had 2 children at that time, and my kids were getting a little bit older. But like 18 months and 5, maybe 6 was about the age. And I knew I couldn't stay with this man. I just knew, I knew I couldn't. And I married him. I married him because he was the first man I had normal sex with. That was the reason I married that man. And this is how messed up our relationship was. The thing he asked me was, will you marry me and no more LSD? And I said, okay, don't ask me to leave Lincoln. Isn't that a great way to start a marriage? But that's what we did. That's what we did. That was how we started our marriage. It was okay for him to do cocaine, but not okay for me to do LSD. Whatever. LSD is cheaper. Whatever. So, we married, 9 years. And then, and I just knew it wasn't going to work out because he hurt me all the time, And it got so it just didn't bother him to, be a little bit aggressive, not much, because I wouldn't tolerate that shit. And he was just emotionally unavailable, it's just the way he was raised. But that's why I was raised too, because you couldn't it wasn't available because everything was perfect in my home. It was perfect. And I believe it was rather easy for my mother. But she was raised by an alcoholic, so by gosh, she was going to make it look perfect. That was her goal, you know. If everything looks okay, it's going to be okay. If you can make sure it looks okay on the outside, then you're going to feel okay. Like when we were engaged, she would say to me, just park your car out front once in a while. And I didn't say this to her. So what, Mom, so your friends think I'm not shacking up with him? That's what it was about. He was like, it's messed up. It's messed up. But that's the way it was. That's the way it was. I married him in 87. But that's what it was all about. Just leave your car parked out once in a while. Stay here once in a while. So it's still all about image. It had nothing to do with Angie or how Angie felt, or nothing ever. You know, she did the best she could. She was a really, really good mom. I don't want to diss my mom at all, because I had fabulous parents, really fabulous parents, and they provided us an amazing home. But you know, you do the best you can with what you have, and that's it. So I'm not throwing anybody under the bus here. Well, maybe my ex-husbands, but that's okay. But they still did the best they could with what they had, and that, you know, that's just true about everybody. There's very few people that really work with malicious intent. And when I think about other things in my life, and when you're at the grocery store, that person who's looking out when you're driving, or that person, rarely are they thinking, I want to hurt you. It's more about what's going on up here, and it's my job to just let it go, because it's usually not about me anyway. And we just don't know what's going on with them. And if they're crabby for years in a row, that's on them, and it's on me to decide if I'm going to let that ruin my day or whatever. But most people don't try to be hurtful on purpose. Most people, and if they do, they're not in my life. That's for sure. But you know, hurt people hurt people. We've heard that. So when I worked at my first church, I followed my sister into nursing school, which I didn't know what I was getting into. I worked fast food. Did not know what I was getting into, and I started going to school, and oh man, this is not for me. But my folks were paying for it, and it was 1 year of college, and so I did it. I was so spoiled, you guys. Here I am, a college student. My mother still gave me lunch money. No kidding. And some of my girls that I was friends with in nursing school, they're like, what? Really? What? I was so spoiled and so naive and so everything. I mean, I had no concept that growing up was a necessity. I had no idea. My first husband, first I married Mike, then I married Dick, and then I married another Mike. And so Mike number one, he said, you live in a sugar-coated world. And I used to say, well, what is wrong with that? What could possibly be wrong with that? Because, you know, it's all rainbows and everything. Well, for a long time, I just thought, what is wrong with that? To have such an optimistic view of the world. But what was really wrong with that was that I didn't know how to function. I just didn't know how to function. And I didn't know how to function. And yeah, now it's not good. So if you don't know how to function, you can't teach children how to function. And you can't function, you can't be mature, you can't solve problems, that sort of thing. So when things got too tough for us, he became definitely abusive verbally. One time he asked me, how many chances do I get? How many chances do I get? Like, he says, like your dad. My dad was the youngest of 9 boys. He grew up in Havelock, and his dad was an alcoholic. And so, compared to my mom, so he was thinking, you know, how many chances do I get, like, and I was like, dude, don't compare yourself to my dad. But anyhow, then I worked at Harris Labs back, and still there, so it's a slaying one, but I worked there for 23 years in my first part of my nursing career. And then we're restructuring. That restructuring doesn't include your position. That's how that ended up and went down. But then I met my second husband, Dick, and he was on his college student, and he was a real bright guy. He was a paramedic. He became a paramedic because his dad died of a heart attack in his arms, and he didn't know CPR. So he became a paramedic, and really bright man. And he was going to go be a physician, and he could have supposed to happen. But he was a good man. He was a really good man. So we had an affair and divorced. Eventually, but I divorced Mike, and it was, I did a horrible thing to Mike, because I met. I fell for Dick, but Mike's father was dying of cancer, and he could stay in the house until after his dad was dead, and then I could move back into the house with my new man and raise his kids in his house. I drank from that for a long time, guys. That was a horrible, awful thing to do to him. So when his dad was dead, I could move back in that house. And I did make amends to him a long time later, because he's pretty mean and cruel to me all those years, raising the kids, and would write charity. He'd write the word charity in the memo, and he'd give me child support and checks for different things and stuff. And so it was a long time. It took me a long time to apologize for that, but it was horrible. But I had to get out. I had to get out of that marriage, and he didn't convince me that I could never ever live on my own. I could never pay bills. I could never. There's no way that I was intelligent enough to run my own life. I couldn't do it. I had to have somebody to help me run my life, and Dick could do that. And he fell in love with my children, and my kids to this day call them their real dad, and thank me for divorcing their dad and giving them their daddy Dick. He was their real dad, and he's since passed away a few years ago, which is difficult, but he was their real dad, and I'm glad they got to see and feel the love of this total unconditional love, and he just scooped up my kids and loved them for real. And then so many years into that marriage, so I switched from smoking weed every day to drinking every day, which was much more destructive, as well as you know, much more destructive. And I did that for a number of years. And here I was working at 6 o'clock in the morning out at MDS. That's what they, so I went from hair slabs to hair slabs, MDS, and then Slayer. And then they sold when it was MDS, and that's when I lost my job. We're restructuring. That restructuring doesn't include your position sort of thing. But, it was some fun. So, note cards don't help you when you're off on a time rabbit trail, do they? I was talking about being married to Dick and my kids and stuff. Oh, yeah. So, drinking every day became more destructive. And so when I was working, I had to work at 6 o'clock in the morning all the time. And I drank to oblivion every single night because, once you start, you can't stop. And he would always wonder, why is she so much drunker than me? Well, it's because he would make a cocktail, but I would drink it out of the bottle between drinks. And one of the beginnings of my end was I was sitting in my daughter's bed, and from where her bed was at, I could see in the reflection of the mirror was the cabinet where the alcohol was kept. And I don't know if she did ever see me take that bottle out of there and pour that big bottle down my throat or not. I don't know if she ever saw it, but that really, really bothered me. If I could just imagine that 9-year-old little girl, or how old she was when I'd been drinking like for 4 years like that. That she could see me doing that, that really pulled me down into a much deeper hole. Because by then I was drinking when I really didn't want to be drinking. You go to the grocery store, and so it's like, no, we can't go to McDonald's because I got to buy this bottle of booze. And I rarely bought it with them, but occasionally we have to because you're with them or whatever. And I go and get it, distract them. I go get it, and I kind of pack things around it because and I was mostly an evening drinker. I didn't drink. I was never a morning drinker because I was working in the morning. I had to keep this image. I had to keep that image. I remember the very first time I smoked weed by myself. That was one thing Mom always told me, that if you ever drink alone, then that's the first time you're an alcoholic. I knew exactly where I was the first time I smoked weed by myself, and I knew exactly where I was the first time I took a drink for myself. Those are just things you remember. But I loved it, that's what alcohol does for us, it just works until it doesn't. Just the oblivion and the pain, but it was always oblivion, always oblivion. And we do all the things, we drink before we go, or we come home before we're drunk. I did get arrested for DWI when I was in college though, so I didn't drink and drive much in my life, because I did go through that once. And I remember when I was I did, and I was living at home at the time, so when I lost my license for 6 months or something, and believe me, I did not drive because I was living at home. So, I was allowed to drive to school, at the grocery store, work, those sort of things, and that was completely it. And my folks knew I drank, they knew I partied. So, for a long time, they wouldn't let me drive on the weekends, and the very first time they let me leave with my car in the evening, I got arrested. I go to some party and I leave and think I'm okay, but just one more, and I was, where they built, it's 56 and Old Cheney out there, that whole change. This is back in 1983. And they built all that area out of there, where curves and does some of that stuff. And I'm driving and think, and I'm lost. I'm really lost. And I think, well, I'll just go around this barricade, right? I go around this barricade and I sink in some mud. That wasn't good. And so I go walking up to these people's house and I knock on the door and I'm like, I need help. Like put me in your car and take me home, or take me in my car, or something like, I don't know what I thought I was going to do. And they're like, that's all right, young lady here. We've got help's on the way. Of course, open the door and there's a cop there. So that wasn't really great. And they take me to the car and they go and see, I'm sure they're just thinking, how incredibly stupid is this woman? Because my car sunk into this mud. And I have a beer in my car, and they take my car and they dump the beer out, and then they just throw the cup on the ground. And I'm so cocky. I was like, hey, you can't do that. Like, literally, we can't, littering, I was just appalled, you can't do that. So then he goes and takes a picture of my car. So then now I'm my own possession. I think he's gonna let that go. I'm not. I got my own possession too, because my mom. I took classes, and when I was in nursing school, we had to take go and sit at an AA meeting. I think they still do that sort of thing. And this was at the old Independence Center at Old Lincoln General Hospital. And I remember, and I told him before I left, I was like, I belong here. I belong here. I absolutely knew it. Everything all those people said, it was me. It was totally me. And then, you go on and you forget that it was just this thing inside. You guys know what I'm talking about. I never forgot that. Anyhow, you just go on, you just keep living your life and just hoping it's going to be okay. You just hope it's going to be okay. It's what else do we do? We just hope it's going to be okay. And it comes a point at some time that I don't know, you get sick and tired of being sick and tired, but in the meantime, you just operate on fear. Just fear. Just fear. Fear in our life. That's another common thread I hear all the time, is fear. I'm just afraid all the time. Just sick. And when I was married to Dick, I went and we did a stomach test because my stomach was upset all the time. And she put me on antidepressant, and I'm angry, very angry. First time I've ever started having medication in my whole life. And so, I don't know, 10 years, so I got married in 87, and that was about 10 years later or something. And I said, well, how long do I have to be on this? Angry. And she said, well, as long as you're married to an alcoholic. I'm like, so now it's his fault? So, oh man, now yes. So for the next 4 years, I didn't drink. I planned my last drink. And for a while, I went to a counselor at EAP through work, and she says, and finally I bring up alcohol, and she's like, is that what this is all about? I'm like, I don't know. And it turns out she's an alcoholic, Linda Peck Allen, and she says, well, I'm an alcoholic, and I can be responsible for free, or you're such about ready to run out here, or you can pay me to be your counselor. And I'm like, ooh, let's pick the first one here. So she helped me work start working the steps in the program, and that's how but it took me a while. It took me, I don't know how many months to think about going to AA. But AA had a good reputation in my mind. All I ever heard was good things about it, and I already knew I had problems with that. I had no problem calling myself an alcoholic. I knew I couldn't quit drinking. I didn't know, and I was terrified that something bad was going to happen. Hannah could see me there. Well, if she couldn't, she was going to. I asked her about it one time, and I don't think she really had, she's like, what? And then something really, really bad did happen. The only time I was a day drinker, why I never drink early in the morning is because I was running this functioning life, and then I worked at MDS, and I'd go and stick needles in people at 6 o'clock in the morning. And I was very good at it. The reason I keep getting very, very good at it, because I still smell like alcohol, and I was doing this job, and I worked there for 23 years, so I was very good at it. But another thing, this is the other second thing, the terrible, terrible thing that happened. And then I knew I had to do something, because that was it, 2 strikes, and 3rd strike, something terrible was gonna happen to my kids, or something terrible was gonna happen. And it was the only time I allowed myself to day drink was when there was a high school game. An early high school game, when it was 10, 11, 12, whatever. And my kids were gone on a day. Their dad had taken them. And so Dick and I were alone, and we could party. And so we got incredibly smashed than normal. She didn't drink all day. And we fought and argued. We drank so damn much, and we'd wake up and we'd look at each other and say, we fight last night? I didn't fight last night. And you know what I'm talking about. Some of you do. And this one particular night, we remember this. And he said something awful about my parents, which is pretty hard to say, because they were the nicest, coolest, gentlest, kindest, generous people we ever met. And he said something shitty about my parents. And I took my glass, and I threw it so hard, and I meant to hit him. Well, I don't know that I meant to hit him. I kind of meant to hit him, but I didn't mean to hit his eyebrow and split it open. But I did. And neither one of us could drive to the ER because we were so drunk. And so, I'm trying to strip this thing up, and there's a big pool of blood on the mattress for the next how many years, And I remember the story that we concocted was, I was an artist, and I had this table, like this, that I worked on, and we worked up the story that he bent down and hit his eye right here on the edge of that wooden table and split it open. But I threw that glass so hard, you guys, that I discovered, a couple of weeks later, that when I was cleaning or something, or I was looking out the window, that there were glass shards embedded in the woodwork of the window. That's how hard I threw that glass. It's pretty hard. So that's when I decided I had to do something about drinking. And so hence I brought this up to Linda, and so it took me several months to get the courage to go, because then you gotta, tell people, you gotta say it, you gotta, where did it go? What time is it?
You got time.
Okay. Oh, there, So, like I said, I planned on my last meeting. I went to a women's meeting Tuesday night, went to Spiritual Awakenings meeting, and I was late. I went to a couple of different churches. I still remember I had a short sleeve suit on, pale yellow suit, and a button up the front with those big buttons. And I go in, I have no idea how a meeting works, no idea. And so I'm like, end up being 20 minutes late, 10 minutes late, whatever, and I listen to the other people talking. By the time they got to me, they just look at me, and I just I need help, and I'm just bawling and a mess, and these women, they just swooped on me, and I've never seen or been to a meeting like it, but, and I told them, I said, I'm going to a meeting, I'm quitting drinking tomorrow, this is it, I'm done, I'm not going to drink anymore. And he said, sure. And I didn't drink for 13 years, that was my last drink. And he continued to drink for the next 4 years. And so I just escaped into, and why I quit drinking on that particular day, I was going to church and at St. Mark's, a big Methodist church, and a congregation of 5,000, and he said, I would like to have 2,000 people in the year 2000 read the Bible. So, and I had been going to church for a while. He was at school, and on Wednesday nights, my kids would go with their dad, and I would just, it was like God pulled me by my hair. I just got pulled there to church, and I go in this extra class, and it was like a class for art, common art, and it's like, oh yeah, sure, I'm in. Well, that class got canceled because not enough people signed up. Well, there was one on healing prayer, and I'm like, oh yeah, pick me, I'll do that. Well, it was healing prayer to learn how to be part of the prayer team. And I'm like, forget it, no way. But in the end, I went to the prayer house and asked them to pray for me and that sort of thing. So I started reading the Bible, and 4 months into it, I said, okay, I'm done. And I planned my last drink, and 13 years I didn't drink. So that's how it went. And so then after my second husband, then 4 years after that, he just became really abusive. Well, finally he decided, okay, back up a second. That was, so after 4 years of not drinking, and that sort of thing, he decided, I said, you need to choose between your family and the law, because we just can't do this anymore. You know, you're an asshole, and we just can't be doing this anymore. How long are you going to keep doing this? You know, I tired of having this stuff in the house, whatever. And he's like, well, and just out of the blue, I got some paperwork in the mail. He filed for divorce. He's like, all right then. And that also, that same month, their dad moved to the Virgin Islands. He had to get away. So within 1 month, both my kids' dads walked out on us. One divorced, one Virgin Islands. And it was pretty tough. And then he formed a couple of months later, so Dick moves out, and then he texts me, or whatever, we weren't texting back then, that wasn't a thing. He says, you know what, you're right, he says, I am an alcoholic. So then he went to Valley Hope, and we got back together for a little while, and then that's when he became really abusive. He had some mental illness stuff that surfaced that he had mastered blues for so long, and it was horrible. And since we had had an affair, he came this close. He was, and I just ignored his abuse because I didn't want to divorce again, and I knew he was such a good dad to my kids. So I just suppressed it. I just didn't. But my daughter was starting to defend me. You know, he would say something, and then she would attack him. Well, that was horrible. I couldn't have that. So then I was like, I can't do this. And he almost came out of his mouth. You're a fucking whore, just like your mom. And I thought, we're done here. We're done here. So that's when I divorced him. And I was able to keep my house and raise those kids for 3 years. I did that and stayed sober through all of it. It was pretty good. And that was okay. And then some sort of thing happened, and I decided I was ready for a relationship. So I married husband number 3, who was a sex addict. And I knew that. He had a porn addiction. A porn addiction is completely and totally different. A porn fascination is completely different than a sex addict. A sex addict is willing to destroy you for his addiction. Porn addiction is, well, that's completely different. You know, that's just entertainment. But that man left me to die one time. And I was his drug. I was his drug. And I was his, he worshipped me in a sick ass way. And I started drinking again. We moved to Ashland. He was from Ashland, I was from Lincoln, and the plan always was when my boy graduated from high school that we would move to Ashland. So, because he had a random business out of Omaha. So that was the plan. So when I moved out there, I quit going to as many meetings. You know, he isolate, do some of this sort of thing. He kept giving me more shit about going to see my family, and so I just isolate. And we were at this great party one time for my company, and you quit hearing that you can't safely drink alcohol and all that sort of thing. So I I worked for a small company, and he rented this big house, and the sous chefs, and we played this game. He had like 5 tables, and there was all these bottles of wine, so white, red, champagne, bubbling, whatever, and all the labels taken off of it, and we had these little cards, and so it was, and then you had to decide which one was the most expensive, what was the cheapest, which was what, I don't know. And so it was like, well, are you gonna play the game, or you're not gonna play the game? It was the only one that could play it. House was gonna play the game. And I thought, well, I'm gonna play the game. It's been 13 years, and if it doesn't work well, I'll just go back to 88. So that's what I did. Started drinking again. And at first we just drank at restaurants. And boy, he liked drunk KG. Drunk KG would dance on tables. Drunk KG, he liked drunk KG. So he enabled me, and then one time, so he's like, yeah, it's expensive to drink in restaurants. Why don't we just take a bottle home? And I'm thinking, bad idea, very, very bad idea, because I know. But I did it anyway, because I'm thinking, I got this, I'll just go back to 88. Bad idea. So, anyhow, I mixed a little Ativan with my Fireball. And, you know, alcoholism is progressive, and is what happened to me after that many years is that I just couldn't walk. One night I'd be drinking the same amount as I did the night before, and I just couldn't walk. And I would just fall. My equilibrium was just gone. So I was going to end up with a TBI, I was going to fall over a banister, something terrible was going to happen. Anyhow, I ended up getting sober again, and it took me 3 years to get into treatment. The night I was celebrating the death of my mother, she'd been gone like, I don't know, 3 years or something. And so I got extra drunk, and I fell and splayed myself between the bathtub and the toilet, and I broke 3 ribs in my clavicle. And of course he kicks me out, he's like, you're a fucking mess. And I fired from the job, so I go to my dad's house, he's in Arizona, and then I called my sister up and I said, I need x-rays and I need treatment. She said, okay, let's go. And I was in treatment for a couple of weeks, and anyhow, so I still didn't stay sober after that for a little while, but I did eventually, but it took me 3 years to get back, and now it's been 5 years I've been sober now again. So, that's pretty good. But just back in April, back to this ADD thing, you know, women present themselves with stomach aches and headaches. I've had stomach aches since I was a little girl. Anytime mom would make a piece of spaghetti, it would make me sick. I've had headaches since I was 20, and I managed my headaches, but I still know my son has ADD. I just didn't even know it till just like a year ago or so. But I managed my headaches with, I was taking Adderall, and then codeine for my headaches, which no one's supposed to give you codeine for headaches, but I tried everything else. I've had like 12 different procedures and probably tried 15 different medications over the career. I'm 59, so I've done a lot of stuff. So Ativan, Narco, and Adderall that I had, I've been taking that stuff for like 6 years, managing it really well for a long time. Until after Dad died, moved out of my childhood home, and I lived alone for my first time in my entire life. I'd never signed my own lease, never ever lived on my own. And I tell my friends and family that I was vulnerable. I'd say it, and it was driving code for I'm not safe. But if I'm sleeping, I'm not in pain, emotionally or physically, right? Because of my terrible headaches and emotionally, because I was so sad with the divorce, my third marriage. He had 6 kids, had a lot of grandkids, and I was still horribly grieving. I lost those kids, those grandkids. I still can't talk about it. Anyhow, so I was very depressed for a long time. Anyhow, so when you're sleeping, you're not in pain, and so if you take some more of those and then you add Lomicum on top of that, you about don't wake up.
So I weaned myself off. I was like, I ran out. I was like, I'm not asking for more of that stuff. It takes too fucking much. And so I went into my doctor and I said, let's cut that stuff down, way down. So I did. But I was in benzo withdrawal and I didn't know it. Benzo withdrawal is evil, very evil. And then the month later, so I cut them down, and then the next month goes by, I ran out, and they didn't call me back, and I said, you gotta call me back, because my mind chart isn't working. And then, I called that Saturday, and her coworker wouldn't help me, they sent me a link here, they wouldn't help me. So we go into Brian, or in Lincoln General, and they slap a wristband on me, and I just about clung to the ceiling, like, you're gonna admit me? I'm freaking out, you guys. I've been on this side of the thing for, I'm a nurse, I've been on this side of it all these years, and I'd already had an appointment for Monday to withdraw all of this stuff with the psychiatrist, because, I was done. I didn't need this shit out of my life, because I didn't want to die. And, but they wouldn't, she did prescribe for me, but the pharmacy wouldn't fill it. So I knew I was going to be in withdrawal, and I wasn't going to sleep until Monday. So for the next 72 hours, I was in that evil world of benzo withdrawal. And this was on April 1st, just this year. See that? And benefits, they dropped my benefits at work. I mean, it's horrible and everything. That's horrible. But anyhow, still otherwise. So here I am. I'm grateful to be here. But everything I have to learn and say and do, that's my story, you guys. That's my story. But there's a couple things that I would have done differently in my drinking and drug career. And it's been since April 1st, because I haven't taken any of those drugs. But these are the things that I would share with somebody in AA, or any sort of drug of choice, whatever it is. There's a lot of good, a lot of bad stuff. Everybody's a lot of ways we need to escape the things that we are put in our lives. I went to more meetings. I went to only one meeting a week, that women's meeting, for like a year. That's torture. It's absolute torture. It was all willpower, and I'm sure I was not a very nice person. If you get a diagnosis of cancer or diabetes, you take your medication every day. If you're at chemotherapy, you're there doing what they tell you to do. Everybody in AA is told to go to more meetings. Everyone. So the people who don't go to more meetings, you're only hurting yourself and the people around you. And I did that to myself. And I only recently, like back in July and August, and my headaches still aren't gone. I've had having 2 MRIs and all these medications, and I've got a headache of 7 right now. I walk around with that all the time, and I'm still working on it. So, anyhow, because I can't have that other stuff anymore. So, anyhow, I just encourage you to go to more meetings, because if alcoholism is your disease, you got to take enough medication, because it's this. We have to have enough wisdom in our meetings that we hear to help us, especially in the beginning, because we have a lot of stuff to unlearn, and then we got a lot of stuff to learn to help us be kind to ourselves. And something else I've started to do for myself, I do not allow myself to say anything negative about myself in my head, because y'all yourselves, you talk a lot worse about yourself than you do to anybody else. None of you would say the stuff that you say to yourself, to Ange, or John, or Billy. You wouldn't say that to any of those people. None of you would, ever. Especially your siblings or your children. Don't talk to yourself like that. You're your own temple. God says, I live in you. And I don't make junk. I live in you. Don't treat his people like that. Don't do that. So just try to not talk negative to yourself. Just try that and go to more meetings. Take your medicine. And it just might help this thing called alcoholism and addiction. That's all. Thanks, guys.